A very tough question. Where do you start?
Is there a chance that AI can make us dumber?
Quite disturbing because we're kind of losing control step by step. But I think it's also so powerful when you see what it can change. You're playing chess, right? So where do you put your eggs? Not in the same basket. Always diversify. Always look at the long-term value. Reduce the time to market to 4 to 6 weeks.
So those companies who just ran very fast, they ran into a little bit of a wall, I think.
You need to make sure you don't build valuations.
Welcome to this episode of Behind the Hustle. Today we have with us Anouar, who is an ex-corporate man who today is operating his own startup with a co-founder. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, Anouar.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be with you tonight. So basically, my name is Anouar. I'm a co-founder of Orem. I'm also the CEO of the company. My background, I'm come from an engineering background. I also studied a little bit of business. So I'm a bit from the two worlds. And then I joined a corporate in the payment space where I spent 12 years of my life. And what I learned a lot around, how to innovate, how to manage companies, and I grew up to become a CEO of one of the business units. Following that, I joined a founding team of the first neobank in the UAE, where I had the chance to try to disrupt this market, especially on working closely with banks, working closely with the regulators, with also payment schemes to ensure that we launch that. It was a huge learning. We'll touch about that later on for sure. And then following that experience, I think it's led me to launch a new startup together with my co-founder. The startup is called Orem, and our platform is the operating system for wealth and retirement, supporting financial institutions in the way they roll out product within the wealth and retirement space. And in the UAE specifically, we're focused on helping the financial institutions that are launching the new end-of-service benefit scheme that was launched by the Ministry of Human Resources during 2023.
Can you explain a little bit for us, for those who are not from this region, what is the end-of-benefit scheme similar to?
So the end-of-service benefit scheme is a workplace savings scheme that's actually powered by the government. As you know, pensions are not set up in the UAE. We have what we call the end-of-service benefit, and it was until now a provision on the P&L, was not something that was invested. And the intention is now to invest that fund and to make sure to give the power to the employee to invest that money into additional future they might be willing to invest in.
So the employees have now some input on how their retirement money are placed? Exactly.
So the employer is actually going to invest that fund within organizations that have been licensed by the government into different funds that will be capital guaranteed. And the employee will be able to invest additional funds, part of the voluntary scheme, to complement whatever investment he wants to make. Today, it's 5%, exactly 5.33% of the basic salary. And for people that are in the company above 5 years, it's around 8.33. That's how it works at the moment.
And this is a new mandatory scheme, or is it that's been mandatory but just it's being innovated?
So at the moment, it's a voluntary scheme. It was announced in 2023. We've been working with most of the licensed players in the market. And it will become at some point mandatory, but it will take time for everyone to be ready, to prepare the ecosystem, to make sure that all the organizations are also comfortable with the way it's built.
But end of service itself is mandatory in the country.
And end of service benefit is mandatory at the moment, but it's the duty of the organizations to pay the employee when he leaves the organization. Now what we're saying is this money will be invested in a capital guaranteed, And it gives more options to the employee to invest in additional funds so he can build his retirement in the future.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I think we're in a good region for the government is willing to innovate and bring innovation forward, even though they might have not had 10, 20 years with the same systems that you might have been used to in Europe. They're moving really fast, and I feel that they're doing it very well when they finally do something.
Exactly. I think the UAE is a place now where people project themselves. They stay for a long time. So it was a must to kind of push this. So regulators are also invested in that mission to make sure that we build an infrastructure and an ecosystem as well to power that. I think everyone is looking for this from a product point of view.
Being an entrepreneur, a founder today, was this something you always had in your belly, a little founder, or since you went the corporate ladder before?
Yeah, so I think from my background, when I started, I studied engineering. I was interested always to understand how things work, and I was a telco engineer. I worked for a telco company, building different equipment, antennas, etc. And I figured out that there is more to be done on the business side, and that's how I came to that place where trying to be between the business and the technology and how to facilitate that. But I think I always wanted to change things, have impact on what you're doing. And when I joined Edenred as a corporate, I discovered the whole world of payment and what we could do, how we can innovate, what's kind of new.
So if you can touch shortly on Edenred, because I think unless you're from the space, it's not a company you necessarily have heard about.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a B2B company. It was focused on prepaid cards, and it's a transforming company in perpetual changes. Always moved from paper voucher. That was a meal card. Meal voucher was one of the main known product within Europe, and it became something that was really huge in Europe and also Latin America, following which the company also innovated towards other spaces, gift vouchers, fuel vouchers, and there was another transformation that came in, which was cards. How can we move to digital? How can we leverage services around it? And then mobile. So the actual fact to be part of this organization that was always looking to change brought a lot of learnings, and being part of the strategy but also the execution also taught me to really be willing to always create new things. So I was always attracted by doing entrepreneurship, but I think within the organization it was very innovative organization and had the possibility to do it from inside, and that's why I stayed for 12 years. But I had different roles, I had different possibility of leveraging this, but something in my mind was always like, I need to do something more, and so something by myself. And that's what drove me to be first part of the founding team of Yap and the new neo-banking space that was changing. I mean, we heard about Revolut, Compte Nickel, and this additional N26. We're all following that at that time, and we're inspired by that, and we thought of launching Yap. And I think that's where we also all started the entrepreneurship adventure. That was also a great learning because there is the regulated activities as well as bringing innovation. And there is always this balance between how to be compliant, but also how to be innovative. And finding that right balance is the really important bit in the fintech entrepreneurship space. So
full disclosure, me and Anouar, we worked together as early founding team members of Yap. But this must have been a quite interesting shift for you from going to taking all that corporate systems and experience, but also a framework that you use that you can't work outside of, to literally starting a startup from the ground where there is no framework. There is nothing. You come in the morning and you figure out what to do yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a big jump because I also came in from also being fed up with all this very stiff governance aspects. Also spending a lot of time on strategic planning, spending a lot of time on budgeting. important discipline that we developed, but at the same time it makes innovation more complicated, and it makes more creativity limited. And that's, I was coming with all this background, and jumping into a startup where everything needs to be built was difficult. Definitely it's a bit chaotic as always, but at the same time I think it's helped to kind of build methodologies, put people around the purpose and what we wanted to deliver. So I think the main thing is understanding what's the context in which you are evolving before jumping in, and then you have the tools, the methodologies to use at the same time. But the most important is people, right? When you have the right people, when you work and you understand what value everyone can bring, then you can put everyone around the table and deliver that into that focus.
You're saying the most important thing is people, which I agree with, but I do think there's another important ingredient, which is the vision. We all need to be able to know where we're going, right? So, because I'm guessing that's something you're doing today in the company you're running. How did you feel that panned out in such fast-moving environment as Yap was as a startup?
Yeah, I think the vision is always the most important. Like if you don't have a vision, then you cannot align everyone towards that. And then, you can go to multiple directions, etc. I think we had a very strong vision at Yap. I think that we wanted to disrupt in a way. We had a crazy idea that still today looks very innovative, which means that the vision was great. I think the important bit is to align everyone around it and make sure that you can execute it. And then you have challenges that comes along the way, because vision is good, people is good, but then you have challenges, especially regulatory aspects, especially compliance, especially, how can you make sure that you can generate a sustainable business? That's all elements that comes into picture when you start a business, and that comes along the way. And then scaling, that's another element. How can you grow in volume and grow not too fast, maybe grow to a pace where you can control your cost, you can control the people you bring in. I think that's what I learned along the way when driving the scalability of a startup. And that's what today we're trying to do, and to build it in a way not too fast, but also in a way that we build sustainable value.
Interesting. If I can roll you back quite a bit in your journey, where did Anouar start out? What was the young Anouar like? What was your passions, your hobbies, and what brought you to this corporate world first and foremost?
Yeah, I think I was always interested we grew up in a world where telco brought mobile phones, and I was always interested to understand how would that work, and that's why I went to study engineering. But my hobbies are mostly around sport. I like always to bring new things and also try new things, but also enjoy playing with the teams and drive teams. I think leadership was coming from there. Played football to a high level, as well as basketball. So sport was an important part of my journey at the beginning.
And the leadership aspect, it sounds like something that came naturally for you early.
Yeah, I think it was something that I was a captain of my team. I was always interested by making sure that I organize things before we actually start. So something that came naturally, and I think leadership is something we have in us, and you just need to be have a context to kind of be visible. I think that's my early journey around my hobbies. I grew up as well in an environment where my mother is from Poland, my father from Morocco, also spent some time in France. So understanding cultures, understanding where everyone is actually coming from is really important, especially in managing businesses. And then, also I think I'm passionate about history, and that's, I always say history is part of what makes you understand how things are moving in the future. So I think that's a bit about my background. So understanding cultures, leadership, that's what shaped me.
I think the culture part is such a good example, because personally also being able to travel a little bit around the world and get that exposure, which being from Norway, it's not something they were the strongest at. And you see that later in people's career, that they might do a startup, but they're not necessarily ready for international expansion because they don't know how to deal with the cultural differences, the market differences. Like the markets that we together worked up for YAP, which is not only in the Middle East, we looked into Africa, Asia, and it was such an interesting journey together because we had to look at regulation partnership different from market to market.
100%.
You had to build a model that could technically work across all of it, but you had to be able to really adapt to the local regulations, market players, how it works, the culture, and everything.
I think this is the most exciting part of our work and our jobs every day. I think when I started to work, I always wanted to be in an exposed company that is exposed to international because of these elements. Because it's rich, when it's multicultural, even launching the same product in different places is very different. The approach is different. The people are different. All what it means is different. So I think being part of Edenred for 12 years also exposed me to that. We're exploring where to go, how to launch new product, how to work with new business units. And that gave me so much of excitement to build additional things. I think it's
because Edenred
really
is
important.
actually in like 40 something countries, right?
I think around 46 countries.
Yeah.
And I think they're still expanding. And then I think expansion, understanding cultures within the leadership part in today's world is maybe the most important thing. I think in Dubai and in UAE, in Abu Dhabi, we're also exposed to that. I mean, 90% of the population is from abroad. And I can tell you when I was managing Edenred, we had around 24 nationalities. And you can imagine the complexity of managing people from different places. Because
I was going to say, UAE is such a melting pot of nationalities, the way the country is constructed, because like you said, 90% are expats.
100%.
Which means out of 10, 12 million people, there's less than 2 million locals.
Yeah.
And the rest are from probably 100 nationalities, right?
And that's what creates this wealth, because why do we have a lot of innovation from this country? Why everything is moving at a fast pace? Because there is this mix of people together trying to deliver something bigger than them. I think that's, for me, I feel home because I come from different places. I feel like this is a place where things are happening, and it's a pleasure to understand people and understand by what they are motivated, by what they're inspired, and how can you drive that business forward.
Yeah. So if you can talk a little bit about, so after YAP, you ended up where you are today. What was, if you can tell us a little bit about the journey and the challenges you went through to come into picture with that company, and the hoops you had to jump through to be where you are today?
Yeah, I think after YAP, I wanted to have something of my own, right? And I think that the idea was to find something that's kind of in my space. What I understood is B2B2C is a right business model. It's something that really creates impact and creates sustainable value. And that's why I wanted to remain in that space. So I met a lot of people, explored different directions. And I met my co-founder. And when we connected, basically the idea was to build something that's an infrastructure. And that's something big. For me, I really like missions, purpose, companies where you can drive value, even takes time, but then you can focus on the right foundations and values. I think understanding and being aligned on the values is very important, because then you create the right foundation for the environment, for people to grow, for people to be excited about the job they come into. And I think we had this big opportunity, which is create something that will have an impact in the future. And that's what I talked about earlier. Orem today, this platform is going to be a huge impact, not only in the UAE, but also in the region, but also globally, because we also can support big pension players, big wealth providers into upgrading their technology, creating value from a financial education point of view, and also from a scalability and operational efficiency.
So you're still in the space of fintech, financial technology companies. For those who doesn't know, what is a fintech?
So a fintech space is a space that exists now since a few years. That's kind of at the crossroad between the finance, the traditional finance, and also the technology space, creating that additional value that maybe traditional players struggle to bring into the user or to the customers. I think that space was, brought a lot of disruption this recent years. We can talk about anything related to lending, to payment, to banking. I think there was a lot. We can talk about it for many hours. But I think this space have brought a lot of value to the customers, have also brought a lot of efficiencies for the traditional players. And I think that space will continue evolving because we know that there is an artificial intelligence that comes in now to build additional acceleration into that space. But I think it's revamping the processes, revamping the infrastructure to make sure that you create the maximum value from the customer side. That's what I would say in a nutshell is, of course, in line with the regulation, with the risk, and with compliance as well.
How does it benefit the regular user in day-to-day that they don't really think about, but it benefit them?
You mean from a
fintech industry in general?
I think you can see that, for example, fintech in the banking space. When you look at the neo-banking, what they've managed to do is to surface all the services that were embedded within the banks, within the traditional way of serving customers. And it came at the right time because there was an evolution of devices, of softwares, and iPhone also came into place. Following that, the way we consume digital was completely revamped, and that also gave place of launching additional services. So today you can manage all your banking services through an app, and that was not possible a few years back. And I think that's what was created by the fintech and the startup ecosystem that was built in many places in the US, in Europe, and also now following up in the UAE as well.
So banks have been typically for people something they have to live with because they need their house loan, they need a place to place their money, a place to receive their salary. But most people globally hasn't really been that happy with the traditional banking industry. Have they been a little bit lazy through this revolution, traditional banks?
I'm not sure it's laziness. I think it's about transformation. It's not easy. Changes happens quick and organizations are big. It's not easy to transform a very large organization.
You should know, coming from a large corporate.
Corporates are not easy, but they also come from a good place because they try to manage the risks and manage the compliance, the regulatory exposure they are built for. So I think this is where I think there is a strong combination that needs to happen between fintechs and also the traditional players. The traditional players has huge experience around how do you manage risks, how do you manage compliance, how do you make sure that you build something that's sustainable in time. And the other side is also the fintech that comes from a startup world that's much smaller organizations, more agile, more quick on delivering technology. And combining these two elements is very important. I think that's what we were exposed to when we were working at Yap, is not only at Yap, even at Edenred. I think we explored BIN sponsorships and how to work with banks and how to leverage that value. And I think it creates a huge value on the long run because if everyone understands what he can bring to the table, then you can create some sustainable value in time. It's very important that all the players understand that. Fintechs alone cannot play. Traditional players cannot play anymore because they need to leverage the speed of it. So how do you combine these two things together is very important.
How come fintechs can't manage it alone?
I think they can, but I think it comes with a long run experience. You can see players as Revolut taking, now they exist since many years. They have the experience. So they can sit with the regulators, explain them how they manage risk, how they manage compliance, how they make sure there is no risk for the end consumer or for the customers overall. B2B space, same thing. I think that element cannot be put aside and just say, let's launch something. But it's also important to be agile and quick. So fintech can do it by themselves, but you cannot remove the experience. You cannot go as fast as you want. You need to leverage that experience that's already in the market, where regulators are also comfortable in the way it's built. So we can make things evolve, but I think you need to start from a strong foundation where risk cannot be taken for the customers but build on it. I think that's where.
So one of the challenges is for a fintech is compliance and regulation. It's quite expensive, and it's quite time consuming to achieve it. So if you want to move fast at a fintech, I want to touch on the topic because you mentioned something called BIN sponsorship, which I'm sure most people don't know what is. If you can mention very shortly, how does that help you in that regard to have a BIN sponsor bank?
So BIN sponsorship is an agreement basically that gives a fintech or a startup the way to leverage the license of the bank, especially on the payment space. So you can issue cards, you can manage all the payment side through the bank, but of course leveraging their compliance experience and working closely with them. That's a bit in a nutshell how it works. I think a lot now it's became something very widely known because I think everyone in a very regulated market try to leverage this kind of partnerships. They are not easy because I think it's built on a win-win situation where everyone sees value and not try to see that people are competing together. That's why when it's actually different segments, that's the different player. For example, a fintech targeting unbanked segment and a bank that's looking at more high net worth. That's a strong area of partnership because it's not overlapping and it creates a lot of value from both ends. It creates for banks an opportunity to go to the fintechs and grab additional value, and from fintech to leverage the infrastructure that the bank has. So there should be a win-win.
So you're describing how banks can go out and acquire new market share in a space where they traditionally are not capable or willing to serve certain audiences, right?
So that's how it started, the BIN sponsorship. Then it's got extended into different areas, like leveraging, like becoming more as banking as a service and leveraging the infrastructure to empower fintechs to create additional value in different spaces, open finance or neobanking or digital lending, whatever. I think infrastructure and foundations are important. I think that's where banks have been building for many years, this infrastructure.
Like a player like Revolut or Nubank in Brazil, which are two of the largest digital neobanks in the world, they both started out under sponsorship. But later they both acquired banking licenses, but it took quite a few years for them to achieve that target, right? So comparing to them, how in your business, are you dependent on a BIN sponsor? Do you have your own regulation? How do you operate?
Are you talking about Orem?
Yes.
I think in terms of Orem, we're not in the payment space. We are more into an infrastructure play. So it's technology where we leverage the financial institutions and we empower them with technology.
So they offer the product to the user. You're providing them technology to offer it.
100%. Okay. And we try to build all the operational efficiencies on the back end and leverage also artificial intelligence to go faster in terms of serving customers, creating product. I think what we aim to do always is configuration versus development. Development sometime, if you want to customize the platform, takes 18 to 24 months. Here, we try to build all the flexibilities to configure the platform and reduce the time to market to 4 to 6 weeks. That's what we're trying to help banks and financial institutions to launch product with.
Oh, that must be quite a change for them compared to...
It's huge, and I think our ambition is to build maybe even more, to kind of reduce that time to market into few days, few hours.
How long ago did your company launch?
We started in 2022.
2022?
Yes.
Because you mentioned, and I want to touch on the topic AI a few times.
Yeah.
In 2022, that was not a topic on the table yet.
It was not, definitely. Yeah. And it's something that, all the companies are trying to kind of incorporate within that service. But I think the important, again, is the infrastructure. Is how do you build strong foundations into launching additional product in the future? So if you have this foundation, then AI will be part of that because it's all about data structure. It's all about scalability of the platform and processes as well. So even though it was not a topic, it's something that was in the same line, in like a continuation, like an extension of what we are building.
But has it affected your journey a lot, like the roadmap you guys are doing? This sudden influx of AI to the level that people are trying to embrace it currently?
I don't think it's changed completely. I mean, it's of course enhanced our journey, but it will create so much efficiency along the way. So I think it was always built with the mindset of scaling, and our goal is to reduce operations to one single person maximum. That's our challenge internally. Make sure that we build an ops that's fully automated, and that of course will be leveraged by AI in the future. But we're running few experiments now internally to build this artificial intelligence with different POCs that we are trying, and we will embed everything once everything is kind of becoming mainstream.
How do you handle AI across the company culture? Is it something you tell your team that you would like them to try to look at and adapt first and foremost? Or does it come from management and you say, we have implemented this tool?
I think it's both ways. I think first, implementing tools is one thing. The second is also running this experiment. Like, they are part of this project. So they're also having this mindset. So we try to attract people that have this do more with less, right? And that's the whole journey. Doing more with less is typically what everyone is trying to do. And I think having this mindset within the values of the organizations helps a lot into, by themselves trying different tools. During our all hands, we talk about it, about different tools that we tried, what could be leveraged to accelerate and create efficiencies. So I think it's really important that there is an exposure and there is discussions about that in the organization, as well as empowering them with tools. And we're open to any tools that could be implemented. That's also another way of empowering everyone with these very powerful tools.
Personally, being a guy who came from pen and paper, I really noticed that it augments my day. I can work much faster on some things.
Yeah.
But I still have some reservations, which comes to it can write something very fast for me. But looking at it before I send it out to implement, I realize I don't have this knowledge. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Do you find any hesitation in, is there a chance that AI can make us dumber?
I think, I see AI as an augmented intelligence. I think humans are already here to make sure we set the foundation. There should be always someone kind of making sure that we're going to the right direction. Of course, like the research is evolving very fast, and everyone talking about this ultimate intelligence that will be smarter than humans. But I think at the moment, it's more about experimenting, making sure that we understand what it helps us to do. I think humans are still needed and will be needed in the short term. The future will tell us how things will move. But I think, how can we use AI now to the most efficient way to build value for the customers and for us on a day-to-day basis? I think that's what we're driven by.
This I agree with. I haven't seen in decades of doing entrepreneurship the opportunity we have now to build something fast and especially test things fast. That opportunity didn't exist back in the day. You're coming from engineering. You literally had to be in the factory and build it to really test it 100,000 times maybe before you put it in the hands of a client. Yeah. And we both know the second you put it in the hands of a client, he will do something you didn't think about. And now you have to go and rebuild it, right? And
that's why now there is this, agility, that you have to iterate much faster. That's why you have well-set organizations in a way that this feedback loop is shorter, so that you can get to a good place quickly. But that will accelerate with AI, definitely. And I think it's a chance that we are living. It's quite disturbing because we're kind of losing control step by step. But I think it's also so powerful when you see what it can change.
In a company running software, building technology, I think there's a few fields it really can help. For example, automated testing. Because what I noticed in a lot of companies I worked with in software is, like I said, I was an expert in every company I helped out to break. Whenever they launched an app or software, I would click some buttons and they were like, they didn't even realize I would click that sequence and the app would break, right? Because as a developer, as a human, you will kind of stick to what you know works. I built it like this journey. My journey works, but don't go off the cliff. But you need to prepare for the person might go off the cliff. And I think maybe AI and automated machine learning can be better at, I'm going to test every eventuality.
Yeah, I mean,
and faster.
Testing is one area where AI will really help, because then you can automate things in a much faster way, and it can look into spaces that maybe human wouldn't look at. So I think accelerating, but also looking at maybe a wider scope will really help, definitely. But I think what is important to understand with AI is also the fact that, you know, there is risks as well that we need to make sure we embed, because, you know, as much as it's a new technology as well, and you need to make sure that everyone is comfortable with that. How do we manage hallucination? How do we manage, risks that comes from not answering in the right way? So I think all of this is actually at the moment being experimented, and more the intelligence will grow, more I think we will tackle all these risks, and I think frameworks will also put this risk into mitigating and building trust, because I think trust is also an important element, and that's where trust comes at the crossroad of risk compliance and also innovation and speed. So that's two things together are important into a life of any startup or fintech, because, you know, building that trust comes at this balance between these two elements, being fast at delivering, showing the value to customers, while really doing the right foundations from a risk and compliance point of view.
I do think, though, for people like us who loves startups and entrepreneurship, and you doing a startup, I think we are very well geographically situated, because I think if you come from Europe and the US and so on, you might not know this, but the government here and the country and regulation, they are really pro being very innovative in especially this space. So they're building a lot of infrastructure. They want to be good. They want to be fast on it, which I think if I'm sitting in Europe, I might not realize that. But I think we are really in a very good place in the history of time for the innovation that is coming.
Yeah, I think the ecosystem is great, because I think it's really empowering to create impact. I think a lot of the, I would say, government entities are always thinking about how do we get into a new place? And you can see it with the AI leadership that was taken a few years back, and putting the UAE as a first place where things are actually creating value to customers. You can see it on a day-to-day basis, from the softwares that we can leverage, the LLMs on the AI space, but also the ecosystem, the events that are happening. So that's really empowers the startup and fintechs to move faster.
Yeah. If I can roll you back to, you said you started in 2022. You and your founder, you got funded, right? I want to touch on two topics, like how was the funding journey? How was it to go out and get funding? And secondly, did it help you to have that experience from, you have a very long experience from corporate, you know about strategy, budgeting, etc., which is one of the things where often young founders don't have that experience yet. So it can be hard for them to convey the data, the metrics, the business plan, and so on to a founder. How did that work out for you guys?
Yeah, I think, as you said, you know, I come from a school from, you know, strategic planning, 3 years plans, making sure that you build also the right metrics. But, you know, I think early stage, very often it's not the important bit, right? It's more about what idea do you have? Are you able to sign any customer? And so early stage is more about the idea and more about what we're trying to build on the long run, as well as making sure that you can sign a customer. What problem are you solving? I think that's the big question. And I think when we were going and trying to fundraise, was the focus is what problem are we solving, and is it big enough? Because sometimes you can solve a problem, but it's not big enough, and that creates a problem of sustainability. So I think that's where the two elements that we were focused on at the beginning, and having the right partners to build that infrastructure, because we knew that this will be an infrastructure play that can be leveraged not only in the region but also globally, and that's how we approached many VCs and many investors along the journey.
Can you give us some insights for those who haven't fundraised before? Like, what steps do you really have to take to go out and fundraise, and what does it take to go on a fundraising journey?
Yeah, I think an important bit is understanding where you go, right, from a strategy point of view. So what we went through is building a pitch deck, making sure that you build also an investor memo that explains what you want to achieve, what is the thesis, and what is the long-term plan. And I think once you have built this, it doesn't come from one shot, like a few iterations to get there. But also I think it's the challenge always is about building the foundation, which is this proof of concept that can be leveraged by one first customer. I think reaching that is important, and that's what takes a lot of energy. So showing the platform working maybe is all the testimony of what you can build in the future.
So you guys built a prototype before you went to the investors?
Yeah, I think the prototype is actually what led us to be funded from an investment point of view. We're supported by a studio venture that also believed in that space, that actually was also building a lot of infrastructure place, and that was also very helpful from setting up the foundation in the UAE.
So if you can explain, what is the studio venture and how did you guys get in contact with them, and how does that steps to lead to that partnership and the funding?
Yeah, so the studio venture is a concept that try to incept few ideas into different spaces and support founders to build the value along the way. So studio venture have been critical into the first part of our journey, where they really helped setting up the foundation of the organization, bringing different people that would support us into building that, but also bringing the ecosystem, different stakeholders that was leveraging the fact that we're in UAE and that we wanted to launch something that will touch the infrastructure and something related to the regulatory aspects. I think being part of understanding what regulatory changes will happen was also critical. And that was also the play of the studio venture that we're part of.
So they were able to help you with the connections and the networking of keeping you up to date on regulation, the right networks, open the right doors for you.
Definitely.
Yeah. So for your journey, that sounds like it was the right play with an investor. But I'm guessing you spoke to more investors than that to reach that stage.
Yeah, I think because we had two different rounds. Like the following round was more about scaling up, right? We got into the first customer. How do we get into multiple customers? How can you scale that operations? And that was the idea behind meeting different strategic investors or VCs. I think we went into different directions, which is more strategic, where I think it was about creating value. I think at the moment we're building up, right? So it's important for us to have the right partners around.
And you mentioned before the interview started that now you guys are looking into going international.
Yes.
So I'm guessing if you can explain what spawned that strategic decision. Was it something on the roadmap all the time? And how has the studio partner helped you to set you up for that?
Yeah, I think the studio venture was much earlier.
So that was building block number one.
Yeah, there's still part of our journey, definitely. But I think at the moment, we've put strong foundations in the UAE. We have the right coverage. We're working closely with the most important players in that field. I think now for us is about expanding internationally. So I think this is driven by the fact that we can feel the demand from different markets, but also because we want to accelerate our growth and make sure that we create value for the customers. So UAE is sorted. We're looking at regional play. We're looking at international play through different directions, either partnerships or working closely with different companies that are in that space.
Yeah, because you base yourself on technology, which means you have a scalable model that can pretty much work anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not bound. I'm guessing you're not bound into one specific regulatory system. You can adapt to it.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of our platform. I think we build a platform that's scalable, that can go into multiple territories, and can build also different product that can leverage either wealth or also pensions, retirement.
When you guys got the original funding, and you are in the fintech space, coming from a lot of that space for a long time now, myself also, you were pretty much just at the cusp of what do I call fintech winter in funding. It really dried up overnight. It used to be no matter which pitch deck you had, you could get millions, which was unheard of, but they will throw money left, right in fintech, right? Then overnight they realized, I think, what do you think happened with fintech funding? What was the reason for the shift of investors?
Yeah, I think the reality, as you know, the money was not free anymore. The interest rate going up was one of the main reasons. I mean, investors were forced to look more into where they put money in, and that's where money was becoming more difficult to get. And I think it's as well a good intention from businesses becoming more healthy, looking at more short-term creation of value rather than a bet that you can leverage in 10 years. I think that's the natural way of how things were adjusted. But I think it's really something that was coming. We knew we were part of that. If you remember, I think the fact that everyone was betting on the future of metrics, and I think everyone was forgetting the sustainability of the business. Raising funds and burning them is not a way of building a sustainable business. It's more about making sure you create some sustainable value in a more short term, and also controlling your costs, because investment was huge, but also burning was huge at that time. And it was necessary to adjust on the long run. That's my read of how it was at the time. And I think now the investment space is also deploying a lot of money, but I think it's more focused on understanding the businesses and seeing the more short-term value of the businesses and sustainability of it. Questioning a lot the sustainability of it.
Yeah, it's very interesting for me, because literally now I feel that investors went back to asking the questions I would read about in business books when I was young. Yeah. Like ABC of investing, they will ask you about your lifetime value, cost of acquisition, what's your actual revenue per user. While, for example, when we were together building e-app, we would literally have investors coming in. I will say, I'm going to get X million users. And they will literally say, listen, I will give you the money if you double your amount of users. And then overnight, it was this drastic shift. I don't care about how many users. I just want to know how much profitable you are per user. And it was such a fast shift in a short amount of space. So it's very hard for me to wrap my head around overnight. I completely agree with your sentiment. And I agree with the way they're asking the questions now. But it must have been, I know it was hard for us, it was hard for many to have that shift. You were never told to be profitable. You were told just to go and grab market share. And overnight you had to, so those companies who just ran very fast, they ran into a little bit of a wall, I think.
Yeah, I think you need to make sure you don't build valuations. You build sustainable profit, you build sustainable revenue. That's where the focus should be. And I think before was the race of users, the race of valuation, especially in our field. I think I'm always commenting on the fintech space, where it was crazy times where growth were multiplied by X, Y, Z, and it was a crazy growth, but it was not sustainable. There was a correction that was coming, and that's what happened.
So in your funding with the studio venture, it was a different story. I'm assuming.
It's an infrastructure build, right?
Yeah.
So by definition, it takes more time to build. It takes more time to also create profitability. So I think that's more of a long-term build rather than, and that's where B2B comes into play, because that's more sustainable as a way of B2C, where you go directly to market. You need to spend into marketing, and growth sometimes is not synonymous of high growth.
Is it a route, if you have any aspiring entrepreneurs listening to this looking into raising funds, is it a route you would recommend them going after studio venture and so on? Or does it depend a lot on what type of business they want to be in?
It really depends. I think, I believe the space in which you are defined how you approach it. Like sometime going after VCs is a good thing, because they create money and they also give you a bit of exposure, especially if they are in the field. But I think they're also looking at the strategic bit where you can create additional value for your business. So it really depends on the way forward. I think studio venture is one of the ways to get funds, but also get value. It depends on what is the exposure. It depends on what is the pseudo venture. I mean, it's not a widely spread concept, especially in our regions, because not easy to implement and execute. But I think it creates value, definitely.
If I may ask, if it's a question you want to answer, in your current company, what was the lowest point for you personally? I'm guessing in any startup you hit some walls along the way, right?
I mean, it's always about fundraising, right? When you are always looking for your next round. But I think we are very convinced about what we're building. So, I mean, I think we're driven by where we want to go. So, I mean, I don't see any. I mean, low, yeah, is if you have few month runway and you're like, I need to close that fundraise. I think that's where I would say is low.
Have you went through that yourself?
Yeah, I think we had that like a few years back, not few years back, last year, where we were fundraising. But I think we're always convinced by what we're building, and also had very constructive discussions with investors around us. So that always put us in a place where we're confident about the way forward. But there are challenges every day. There are people leaving the organizations, and you didn't expect that. You have to manage that. There are a lot of challenges, right? How do you build trust while you're small and you don't have a brand reputation? I think that's also important. But I think you build it over time because your reputation is about what you deliver and how you deliver it. That's why it's all about people. Come back to people we said earlier. The right people you onboard will be in front of your customers tomorrow, and they will be embedding your values. And I think it's really important to spend a lot of time onboarding the right people. It's not as easy as it's easy to hire people, but it's not easy to find the right guys.
What is your personal process? So being an entrepreneur is challenging. Every day there is some sort of challenge you didn't plan for, small storm that interrupts your day, something to deal with. Do you have a personal process you use to go through to manage that mentally, to manage your day, or any tips and tricks that Anouar does?
I think the engineering part always tells me that there is always a solution to a problem. So I think there are challenges. We always have challenges. I think that's what we like. We like solving problems. And I think it's about understanding what's the problem first. So, I always have this in mind, which if you take 55 minutes to frame a problem and take 5 to solve it, then you are in a good place. I think that's the most important, is to understand what problem you're trying to solve, because that's what we like as entrepreneurs. We like to solve problems every day. And I think that's really important for us to be exposed to that, but also be ready mentally that nothing will go as planned and that you have to manage things along the way. But I think it's also important to set up the expectations with everyone in the company, because it's a startup. Things move in different directions and not always as planned. So I think having the right expectations is important.
What's the perfect fit for an employee of their background mentality that you would look for hiring into infrastructure, fast-growing startup?
So the important bit is the fact to have the entrepreneurship mindset. Like, you can come from corporate, as I did, move to entrepreneurs, but you need to have a clear mindset of setting up a quick pace. Like, you shouldn't be waiting for it to happen. You should look always on how to help, because scopes are not defined. That's what makes also the magic of entrepreneurship and startups, is that you have plenty of problems to solve. And if you can help each other, then you can move faster. And I think that's an important bit to understand. If you want to jump from corporate to startup, you need to be hands-on. Being high level, staying on the surface is a problem, because understanding the core of the problem, solving it, will be very important, and the pace of it is also important. So yeah, it's difficult to say one specific profile, but I think it's really good to believe that there are people that really love the fact that it's changing every day and there is new tasks. That's, I think, what I was attracted by as well. It's like, it's not the same job every day. It's every day new job, every day new problem to solve.
So if you had to put, for any team member you have and any new team member, you have to put your core values, what you expect from them to be in line with the company in 3 core values, what will they be?
I mean, focus on the problem first. Make sure that we frame the problem and we never diverge from it. I think honest and no ego communication environment, that's important for us. Honesty, being honest about what you live is really important. The third one, I would say, growth mindset. Always learning. You can see how the environment is today. The environment is moving, new technology every day. How people behave is changing as well. So being in this constant wheel of learning, I think that's really what's really important for us.
Did you ever have any mentors on your journey?
Of course, I think I had different mentors, and that's what drove me to become what I became today. I think when I was at Edenred, I will not name them, but I think they showed me a lot of learnings along the way, more from a commercial aspect, because I'm coming from an engineering background, focus on more operational bit, learned a lot along the way on the commercial aspect and how to also manage people. A lot of humility, it's important. Leadership is about dealing with people, as I said, being simple, not rocket science, but it makes a big deal in terms of delivering value. And then mentors more from a strategic aspect. Where do you put you're playing chess, right? So where do you put your eggs? Not in the same basket. Always diversify. Always look at the long-term value and execute day by day. So mentors are so important. Also, when I actually became a CEO of an organization at Edenred, and I was by myself. It's difficult to run a company, and when you're young, I mean, you've never been exposed to that. So how do you run this? Like, you need a mentor. I had also a mentor at that time, and that's still part of my journey today, and that helps me to solve some problems that I need inputs, I need point of views to see how you can frame the problem and how you can solve it as well. So mentors are critical in the journey of any entrepreneurs, and you can have different mentors. Can be from a leadership point of view, can be from a technical point of view. Surrounding yourself with people that are much better than you, that have much more experience, is so important.
And I think what you're touching on, that's a lifelong journey, because I see it a little bit too often. When people reach a certain stage, their ego might take over a bit and they might say, I don't have anything to learn anymore, I know everything. But I think it's a lifelong journey, right?
It is. I think leadership is about humility and realizing that we need to learn every day. And there is always someone that will be better at something than us. And I think that's where people are also important. Surround yourself with people that knows much better things than you. So it is really important to always have mentors, surround people with people that are really smarter than you in many fields, but also have the humility of saying I don't know, because ego never drives any value. I think that's one of the core value of our organization is how do we build value, but how do we say we don't know? Because the easier we know, the faster we can act. And that's how it makes things faster. So it's at the core of our organization. Yeah,
very good. I like that. I like that a lot. I want to touch a little bit on the topic of fear. So you came from the corporate background. You were involved in a founding team of another startup. Then you went and did your own startup. Did you have any time that fear would keep you back? Because it's quite a big leap to go out there, like you said. You had some good exposure. You've been CEO of a company. You've been exposed to doing it, a startup before as a team. But now it's you and a founder driving it. How do you tackle the fear of it?
So the fear, we tackle the fear with experience and different situations that we went through. So I think when you're going through a very challenging time, it's huge lessons. And that's kind of gives you power to go through any fear you have. But I believe the most important thing is to focus on what you do, small steps. You don't know what you don't know. That's really what's really the sentence that I use more often, because there are things that we plan, but things can go in a different direction. So what's the fear will bring? Not much. You can mitigate that fears with action, making sure that you learn and you prepare yourself. And more you prepare, more you will be ready to any situation. I think you cannot be ready for any situations, but I think the fact that you're moving to actions remove that fears and challenges that we might encounter.
I wanted to imagine two people with different background. One coming from the corporate ladder, has been doing that maybe like yourself for 10 years, and one who doesn't have that background at all, and they both have an entrepreneur in their spirit that they want to go out and go and do something. I'll guarantee you they both might be held back by the fear of what if I do it? They might have fear of starting, right? What would be your advice? And would the advice be the same for both? Or is it a little bit different since, what's your advice on starting?
From where can I start? I think, I believe first, don't start alone. Have a co-founder or be part of a founding team. I think that removes a bit of fear that you might have, because bouncing ideas is important, and being part of, like, at least you are two and you can face the challenges, because in the journey, it's not an easy journey. Like, to reach a point B, you're going to take so much, it's going to go up, down, left, right. So it is really important that you have someone with you, part of the team. That removes a lot of fear that you might have, especially coming from the corporate world, and especially the funding part. I think the funding part is always what kind of blocks people, but I think it's more also about execution and getting things to move. It's not all about money. It's also about setting up that POC at the beginning, getting the right people to deliver that, having the right vision, strategy. So doing it at least with two people, having a co-founder or a founding team, that's much better from any aspect, I would believe, when moving from a corporate.
So that sounds like something that might be easier to find in the network of someone who went to corporate and the path of that education and into that field. So that's why I want to ask, is it a different journey for the two founders, or is the journey technically the same?
I think it's the same journey. It's just like the approach is different, because I think someone that was always in the startup world will always have removed all these fears from the start, and sometimes started by himself, but will realize that, when launching with two people or three people is maybe easier and more efficient. And so the path to reach that same point is different, but I think it's kind of the same connecting point.
But how do you go about finding the right co-founder? Because in the end, it's like a marriage. If it's not very well, you're matching each other very well, you will have some bumps along the road later.
Yes, it's exactly what you're saying. It's another marriage that you start. And it's not something that you define. It's complex. It's not easy to find a co-founder just like that. You need to have a match. But I think the foundations are values and also the vision. If you're aligned on these two things, then you can build strong trust, and you can cross any challenges along the way, because you have challenges around investment, you have challenges around managing people. But if these values are aligned and also the vision is clear, where you want to get to, then I think you can cross any challenges your way. Finding people is the most difficult, and it's not easy to kind of cross path of someone that will be fully aligned.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult question. I'm not sure I'm able to answer, because
how did you find your co-founder?
I think it's sometimes it's just a bit of chance, right? A colleague presents you to a colleague, and you find yourself in interesting discussions. That's how it happened with me. I don't think it's something that was planned, or I was looking for networks, just looking for my next chapter, and find out this discussion to become really aligned from a value point of view, from I think what we wanted to deliver, and that's how we matched. And I think that's where we're still, after 3 years, we're still around, and we're still building strong foundation. I think it's really, really important.
So you matched on the vision. Are you very similar in your skills and the road, or are you two very different components to the journey?
We are two different people, right? Yeah. I come from more the operational bit, how to build these foundations. But I think my co-founder comes from a knowledge, comes from the pension world, brings a huge value to what we're building. So I think the combination of these two things is important, as well as the technical knowledge. Our CTO is also part of our, we're three in a way to solve that problem. And this problem is quite big. And that's why I think it's just the start of the journey. But it's important that we are three to solve that from different point of view.
Because in a personal opinion over the years, I've seen a little bit often, but this is a personal opinion on the matter, that someone would choose the co-founder, which is very good friends, very close to themselves in the skill set and everything they do. But for me, that's a bit of a mismatch because it's harder to grow.
That's also my personal view, is that I don't think that personally you can work with someone that you know very well, because I think personal relation is different than business relation. And I think you need a lot of honesty. So it doesn't mean that in a friendship relationship you don't have honesty. But I think in the business you need to be able to say things through directly. And that's usually where things kind of mismatch. So I would just say that it needs to match. Sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's not. But in the space of non-friends, I think it's better, because you can be honest, and you can be honest about things. It's important. Honesty is very, very important.
Yeah. Okay, I want to flip the script a little bit on you. If for some reason tomorrow there is no ORM, there's no company, regulation changed and there's no more pension, you need to go out and create a new business, but you have a very short timeline. If you needed to make a 30-day plan, what would you plan for 30 days to start from scratch and come up with an idea and start executing it?
Oh, a very tough question. Where do you start? Is it taking 30 days? It's quite challenging.
That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, sometimes is about, I work a lot on regulated activities. So this is a lot of headache to manage, like making sure that you build the right foundation, the compliance, the risk, and then the innovative part as well. But I think going into the non-regulated space would actually be something where I don't have time. Focus on the non-regulated piece, because it's easier to launch something. Identify problems that are in the market where you want to launch, understanding behaviors of people, identifying some big markets where you want to go to, and identify the problem to solve. That's the approach. And then making sure that you think of partnerships, sometime to accelerate, not do everything by yourself. I think that would be my approach. Building a business plan, building some mock-ups to show how it could look like. And obviously I'm biased because I'm talking already about fintech and going into mock-ups, etc. But it can be anything else. To be honest, it's more about showing people what you want to provide as a solution to a problem that you identified, and how big is the problem. I think sizing is so important, because then not worth digging into the problem if the problem is very tiny. And that's what I would say.
So I wanted to ask you, in your business today, what is your unfair advantage?
As I mentioned earlier, I think the important bit in the business is a bit of leadership, right? Leadership is about driving people to a common goal, clarifying the vision, but also driving the multicultural aspect of it, because we're building a global company, and this global company is powered by people from everywhere. So understanding the culture is really key, and I think that's where I think I can bring a lot of value, because understanding people is the key, driving them towards a direction, understanding their motivation, and how to inspire them to get to that right goal. So multicultural aspect, I think, is one thing. The dual expertise as well. I think the fact that I'm coming from a background of engineering, also the experience I had along the way working on technology company, and being at the crossroad between business and technology, creates value from creating shortcuts, understanding what the customer wants, but also delivery and understanding how to frame it from both sides, from risk and compliance, and always speed and innovation. That's always two things that are in my mind and where we always need to balance out.
Since you're going internationally, do you see your unfair advantage in the multicultural expanding? Because I immediately, when you said it, I thought about, that's great, because if you go to a new country, a new market, you might already have people in your team who has that cultural background, which makes it so much easier to understand the market before you enter it, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact to have people from everywhere helps a lot into understanding that market, and also sometimes leveraging partnerships within the local market also helps you to understand what problem you want to tackle.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Do you have any key lessons learned in your founding journey?
I think key lessons, if I'm thinking about what is really important, again, I would say people, because I think that's the foundation. Leading people with the right approach is really important, especially in our region. Humility, as I mentioned, mentors showed a lot of way of being simple, building trust with people, and then trying always to focus on what's in it for them so that they can be part of that journey. I think that was one of the critical learning for me when we started building that fintechs here in the regions. What other lessons I would say, maybe the fact of always thinking of the risk, because coming from engineering and product side, you always think of how can I innovate, how can I focus on creating additional product, additional features, always kind of maybe neglect the risk and compliance side. But I think that's now, for me, from the experience we had, very important bit on considering from the start. So compliance by design is not an option. That's really important when building any startup. Like, you cannot neglect that and say, I'll do it later. You cannot do it later. You have to think about it. Having the right procedures, having the right processes is really important.
Any last words, any advice to aspiring entrepreneurs who's thinking about taking the same journey?
Yeah, I think I always say I think, but I always think. I believe the never chase hype or just being known for being known. I think always focus on the problem and make sure that the problem is big enough. That's really important. Another advice would be to focus also on compliance by design. Never forget the right processes, even though it's annoying, but it will bite you up in the long run. So I think really important that you build value, but you also build, regulatory pipes and compliance to make sure you can be sustainable in time. And maybe the last thing is about building trust, transparency. What you see is what you get. And that's really important in delivery. In the region is more and more important. Like, people want to be comfortable working with someone that's, when he says, I'm delivering this, we'll get this. And that's I'll emphasize on that all the time. And the last bit for me is persistence and also discipline, because it's resilience always on the day-to-day basis. There will be hard moment, there will be tough moment, but
Plenty.
you need to be always ready to face the adversity. But then when you go across that challenges, you become stronger, and I think the whole organization also benefit from that. That's really important. That's all what I would say. Consistency, every day, continue waking up, fighting for the right reason, waking up for the right reason, and bring the right people on board that will help you to build that's future you want to build for your organization, and this dream that you want to achieve. That's what I would say.
I will leave it at these two wise words: consistency and the right people.
Yeah.
Anouar, thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Peter.
If you like this content and you want to hear more real founder stories, we drop new episodes weekly. Make sure you don't miss that and click subscribe.